Detective Mark Reynolds had seen his fair share of danger, but he always felt safer with Max by his side. Max, a sturdy German shepherd with a sleek black and tan coat, had been with Mark for 5 years, but their connection went far beyond the typical handler-dog relationship. They had saved each other more times than Mark cared to count. Max had pulled him out of tight spots during busts, while Mark had always been there to calm his partner after difficult missions. In a world of uncertainty and danger, Mark trusted Max with his life. To the public, Max was a highly trained K-9 officer, intelligent, efficient, and invaluable in the field. But to Mark, he was more than just a working dog. He was a companion, a protector, and a silent confidant who could sense when Mark needed space and when he just needed to be left alone. Their bond was built on years of trust, training, and shared experiences that had forged an unspoken understanding between them. When Mark wasn't at work, Max was a member of the family. Mark's daughter, Lily, was just 9 years old, but she loved Max like an older sibling. She'd grown up with him, always by her side in the yard or curled up at her feet while she read her books. Max was patient with her, never once snapping or showing signs of aggression, despite the chaos of his training. He would let Lily practice her obedience commands and even play games of fetch, though he always managed to catch the ball midair, making her giggle every time. Their days together were simple but comforting. After a long shift, Mark would come home, exhausted, and Max would greet him at the door with a wag of his tail and a bark of excitement. Lily would run into his arms, and the trio would sit in the backyard, unwinding together as the sun dipped below the horizon. But there was something Mark knew that made their peaceful moments even more bittersweet. He had seen other K-9 teams lose their partners when a dog aged out or became too injured to work. He couldn't imagine the day when Max wouldn't be by his side. And though he would never admit it aloud, Mark worried about what would happen to Max once that day came. He didn't know it yet, but that day, the day he feared, was coming sooner than he could have ever imagined. Mark and Max's partnership, which had been forged through countless cases and near-death experiences, was about to face its ultimate test. The day the raid went wrong started like any other. The early morning sun had just begun to filter through the blinds of Mark's bedroom when the call came in. A drug bust, an operation months in the making, was finally going down. Mark knew this would be a high-risk situation, and as always, Max was ready. His partner's piercing eyes met Mark's as they loaded up in the patrol car, the dog's steady presence a comfort as they drove toward the scene. At the warehouse where the bust was set to unfold, the team gathered under the cover of darkness. Mark could feel the tension in the air, the quiet murmurs of the officers around him, the familiar hum of radios, and the low growl from Max as he sensed the danger. This wasn't just another routine arrest. They were going after one of the most notorious drug rings in the state, and the stakes were high. Mark gave Max a quick, reassuring pat on the head. "Let's keep it tight, boy. We've got this." Max responded with a single, sharp bark, as if to say, "I'm with you." The raid began smoothly. Mark and Max led the charge, with Max sniffing through the crates and boxes, quickly zeroing in on the drugs hidden in the back. But then, everything fell apart in an instant. As Max alerted Mark to a hidden compartment, a loud, sudden explosion rocked the warehouse, throwing Mark off balance and into the debris. In that split second, gunfire erupted from an unexpected angle. The scene turned chaotic. Mark scrambled to his feet, instincts kicking in as he dove behind cover. Amid the confusion, he heard Max's growl, followed by a sharp yelp of pain. Time seemed to slow as Mark's heart skipped a beat. He looked up, spotting Max charging toward him, his loyal companion, putting himself in the line of fire. Before Mark could react, a bullet grazed Max's side, sending the dog tumbling to the ground with a pained howl. Mark's blood ran cold. He had seen this happen to other K-9s, injured in the line of duty, but he never thought it would be Max. "Max!" Mark yelled, his voice thick with panic. Without hesitation, Mark bolted from his cover and reached his partner, cradling Max's injured body in his arms. The pain in Max's eyes mirrored Mark's own agony. He could hear his fellow officers yelling orders, trying to subdue the shooters, but in that moment, all he could focus on was Max's labored breathing. With the help of the paramedics, Max was rushed to the nearest veterinary hospital, where he would undergo hours of surgery. As Mark paced the waiting room, he realized that this raid had cost them more than just a dangerous criminal. His partner, his best friend, was now fighting for his life. And in that fragile moment, Mark knew their world had irrevocably changed. Days passed, and Mark's world became a blur of hospital visits, phone calls, and paperwork. Max was stable but still recovering from the bullet wound that had nearly taken his life. The doctors assured Mark that the bullet had missed any vital organs, but it was still too soon to tell if Max would ever fully recover. While Max rested in the veterinary clinic, Mark found himself back at the station, unable to shake the unsettling feeling that had begun to gnaw at him. Something felt off, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. He kept replaying the moments of the raid in his mind, trying to piece together what had gone wrong. But the images of Max lying on the floor, injured and helpless, haunted him. It wasn't until Mark overheard a conversation in the break room that his unease shifted into full-blown suspicion. He was chatting with Officer Harris, a longtime colleague, when a few other officers entered, talking about the department's plans for Max. The tone of their voices was casual, almost too casual. Mark paused mid-sentence, his attention snapping to the conversation. "You hear about Max. They're talking about retiring him," Officer Harris remarked, leaning against the counter. Mark's stomach tightened. "Retiring him," he repeated, trying to sound indifferent. "Yeah, I heard they're looking at a few options. Either putting him up for adoption or, finding him a new home." Harris shrugged as if it was just another piece of news. But to Mark, it felt like a gut punch. The conversation continued, but Mark could barely focus. He felt a rush of anger and confusion flood through him. He had always assumed that when Max retired, he would have the option to take him home, just like many other handlers who had worked alongside their canines for years. But the idea of Max being put up for adoption made his blood run cold. Was it really that simple? Could they just send him away like any other dog? That night, Mark began to dig into the department's records, searching for any sign of irregularities in Max's treatment. He reached out to some trusted colleagues, trying to confirm what he had overheard. The whispers had started. Rumors that Max wasn't just going to be retired, but that he might be sold to a private buyer. Mark's stomach churned as he learned more. Retiring a dog was one thing, but selling him, that wasn't something he could accept. His mind raced with troubling possibilities. A buyer with deep pockets who could afford a trained K9 like Max could have any number of intentions, none of which sat well with Mark. He thought of the people who might see Max's skills as a commodity, something to be exploited. The dark thought gnawed at him. Was Max being sold into the wrong hands? The idea of losing Max, not to retirement, but to someone who might not appreciate him, made Mark's blood boil. He had to act quickly before the unthinkable became reality. But who could he trust? It was an unusually warm afternoon when Lily decided to visit Max. Mark had tried to shield her from the growing tension, but the young girl could sense something was wrong. Her father, usually strong and reassuring, had been quiet and preoccupied lately. He'd been spending more time on the phone and less time at home, and Lily missed their quiet nights together, when it was just the three of them, Max included, curled up on the couch. Lily loved visiting Max. The bond between the two was undeniable. She'd spent years growing up with him, playing with him in the yard, and sitting beside him as he rested after a long day of work with her dad. But today felt different. Mark was too busy with phone calls and meetings, so Lily decided to go alone. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening, something that involved Max, and she wanted to see him for herself. The moment she walked into the veterinary clinic, Lily felt an odd tension in the air. The usual bustling activity seemed quieter, as if the staff was avoiding eye contact, moving with an odd sense of urgency. She spotted Max through the glass window of his kennel, lying quietly on his bed, his eyes half closed, still recovering from the surgery. But there was a new unease in the air, something Lily couldn't quite place. As she approached the counter, she overheard two workers talking in hushed tones. Their conversation seemed innocent at first, discussing the dogs and the clinic's busy schedule. But then, Lily caught something that made her pause in her tracks. "Did you hear the buyer is coming tomorrow?" one of the workers said, glancing around as if to make sure no one else could hear. "They'll be taking Max for sure. He's one of the top dogs. You know how much they're offering for him, right?" The other worker nodded, her expression serious. "Yeah, I heard. If everything goes according to plan, Max will be out of here soon. He's already got a new home lined up. A very private home." Lily's heart dropped. She knew exactly what they were talking about. Max wasn't just being retired. He was being sold. The realization hit her like a cold wave, and she couldn't breathe for a moment. Max, her best friend, the dog who had always been there for her, was going to be taken away, sold to the highest bidder. She couldn't let that happen. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, but her hands were trembling. She had to know more. She had to stop it. Lily quietly moved closer, making sure the workers didn't see her. She couldn't risk being caught eavesdropping, but she had to gather more information. Her heart raced as she listened in, hoping to learn anything that would help her save Max. "Who's the buyer?" Lily heard the first worker ask. "I'm not sure," the second one replied, lowering her voice. "But I heard it's someone from out of town, looking for dogs with specific training. The kind of dogs that can be useful, for private security work." Lily's stomach twisted in knots. Private security. That didn't sound right. She didn't know the details, but one thing was clear. Max was in real danger. She couldn't wait for her dad to figure it out. She had to act now, before it was too late. She turned and left the clinic, determined to find a way to save Max. She knew that getting this information to her father was important, but she also understood that time was running out. With a sense of urgency driving her forward, Lily set out to learn everything she could, no matter what it took. She would not let anyone take Max from her, not while she still had a chance to stop it. Lily's heart raced as she walked away from the clinic, her mind reeling with the chilling conversation she had just overheard. The idea that Max could be sold to someone who might exploit him haunted her every step. She knew she had to act fast. Her father, Mark, was caught up in his own whirlwind of work, and she couldn't risk waiting for him to figure it out. The fate of Max was in her hands now. The first thing Lily did when she got home was grab her old notebook, the one she used to jot down everything she could about her favorite books, mysteries, and random things she found interesting. Today, it would be her investigation journal. She knew she had to gather as much information as possible about the clinic, the workers, and the mysterious buyer before anyone else found out what she was up to. Lily's first stop was the local library. The internet was full of information, but she knew the library had old records, and more importantly, it had people who might know things the internet couldn't tell her. She spent hours digging through police reports, old articles, and anything related to K9 units and retired police dogs. Slowly but surely, she pieced together bits of information about a shadowy market for retired K9s. She learned that there were rumors of dogs being sold to private security firms, some legitimate, others far less savory. But what troubled her most was the mention of a man, someone involved in a number of high-profile K9 transactions in the past few months. His name kept coming up, and he had a reputation for being connected to the underworld. As the hours ticked by, Lily's resolve grew stronger. She could feel the weight of the secret pressing down on her, but she didn't falter. She knew she was getting closer to the answers she needed. She just had to find a way to get the information to her dad before it was too late. That evening, as Lily was coming home, she spotted a familiar face. Jake, one of her classmates who always seemed to be hanging around the neighborhood. He was sitting on the curb, doodling in his sketchbook, and looked up when he saw Lily. "Hey, what's up?" Jake asked casually, though he noticed the serious look on her face. Lily hesitated, biting her lip. She knew Jake could be trusted, even though he was a few years older and often involved in things that made her parents raise an eyebrow. He wasn't a troublemaker, but he did have a knack for finding out things others didn't want known. "I need your help," Lily said, her voice firm with determination. Jake raised an eyebrow, setting his sketchbook aside. "With what?" Lily sat next to him and quickly explained the situation. About Max, the overheard conversation, and the potential sale. Jake listened intently, his eyes widening as she described the shady buyer and the connection to the private security firms. "Whoa, this is some serious stuff," Jake said, his usual laid-back demeanor replaced by a rare intensity. "We need to figure out where they're keeping Max and who this buyer really is. I can help, but we need to move fast. This kind of thing doesn't take long." Lily nodded. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone to back her up, but Jake's determination gave her the confidence to move forward. Together, they began plotting their next steps. Jake had an old friend whose father worked as a security guard at the clinic's storage facility, and he promised to ask around. The two of them spent the next few days gathering more intel, following the faintest of leads. With each piece of the puzzle falling into place, the danger became clearer. This wasn't just about saving Max anymore. It was about stopping something bigger, something dangerous. Lily was no longer just a little girl trying to protect her dog. She had become part of a much larger fight, and she knew she couldn't back down now. It was late one night when Lily's phone buzzed, its shrill sound cutting through the silence of her room. She had been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, her mind racing with everything she had learned over the past few days. It was like the pieces of a puzzle were slowly coming together, but the final picture was still unclear. She had to do something. She knew time was running out. She glanced at the phone screen. The caller ID read, "Unknown number," but something about the call made her stomach flip. She hesitated before answering. "Hello." Lily's voice was quiet but steady. The voice on the other end was low, almost a whisper, but it carried an urgency that sent a chill down her spine. "You don't know me, but I know what you're trying to do. You're looking to stop them from taking Max." Lily's heart skipped a beat. Her first instinct was to hang up, but something told her to listen. The stranger's voice was strangely comforting, though it sounded like it belonged to someone who knew a lot more than they should. "You're right," she said, swallowing her fear. "How do you know?" "I've been watching. I know the people you're after, the ones trying to sell them. You've got to be careful, Lily. They don't take kindly to kids poking around where they shouldn't." The voice paused, and for a moment, Lily could hear a faint rustling in the background. "I can help, but you need to trust me. Meet me tomorrow, midnight. Bring no one else, not even your father. I'll show you where they're keeping him, but you have to act fast. If they find out what you know, it'll be too late." Lily's mind raced. She wanted to argue, to demand more answers, but she knew she couldn't afford to waste time. This was the break she had been waiting for. It could be the key to finding Max before he disappeared forever. "Where?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A warehouse on the edge of town," the voice replied. "I'll send you an address. Be there on time, and be careful. They'll be watching." The line went dead before Lily could respond. She sat in the darkness, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea who this person was, or if she could even trust them, but one thing was clear. This was her only chance. She turned on her lamp and pulled out her notebook. There was no time to waste. She had to tell Jake, but she couldn't let her dad know just yet. This wasn't something she could drag him into without proof. She scribbled down the address and tried to steady her nerves. Tomorrow night, she would meet this mysterious stranger, and she would find Max. But as she lay in bed, trying to sleep. A new fear gripped her. What if she was walking into a trap? The unknown number, the cryptic message. It all felt too strange, too dangerous. But there was no turning back now. The clock was ticking, and Max's future hung in the balance. The next night, Lily couldn't shake the tension gnawing at her. As the evening sky darkened, she packed her bag with a flashlight, her phone, and her notebook. She had told Jake about the mysterious call, and though he was concerned, he had insisted on accompanying her. But Lily knew she had to go alone. This wasn't something she could explain to anyone else. She had already come this far, and she couldn't risk anyone else getting caught up in whatever was about to unfold. At precisely 11:45 p.m., Lily slipped out the back door of her house. The cool night air was a sharp contrast to the warmth of her home, but she barely noticed it as she crept through the alleyways, careful to avoid any streetlights. She knew the warehouse wasn't far, but the closer she got, the more unsettled she became. Every rustling sound seemed amplified, and the distant hum of traffic felt strangely distant, as if the world had narrowed down to just her and the looming darkness ahead. Lily arrived at the address just as the clock struck midnight. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows dark, its silhouette blending into the night sky. The place was abandoned, or at least it seemed that way. There were no signs of life, no vehicles parked nearby. Nothing to suggest that it was anything other than an old building collecting dust. She hesitated at the entrance, glancing around nervously. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out to find a text from the unknown caller. Asterisk, I'm inside. Come to the back. Quickly. They're here. Lily's heart skipped a beat. Whoever this person was, they were either one step ahead or dangerously involved. Without another thought, she made her way to the back of the building, the crunch of gravel underfoot the only sound in the heavy silence. As she rounded the corner, she spotted a shadowy figure standing near the back door, cloaked in darkness. The person didn't say a word at first, but simply gestured for her to approach. Lily hesitated for a moment before stepping forward, every muscle in her body on alert. The figure finally spoke, their voice low and gruff. You're here. Good. We don't have much time. They're on their way. Lily's eyes adjusted to the darkness, and she could see now that the person was an older man, his face hidden under a hood. He didn't look like anyone she recognized, but something about his presence made her uneasy. Despite her fear, she had come this far, and there was no turning back. Who are you? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he motioned for her to follow him into the dimly lit interior of the warehouse. We'll talk inside, but you need to listen carefully. You're not just stopping a sale. This is bigger than you think. They're using dogs like Max for more than just private security work. They're training them for illegal operations, something dangerous. Lily's blood ran cold. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to process the man's words. Whatever was happening here was far worse than she could have imagined. As they moved deeper into the warehouse, the faint sound of voices grew louder. Lily's stomach twisted with dread. She had no idea who she was dealing with now, but she couldn't back out. Not when she was so close. Stay close, the man muttered, and keep quiet. This isn't just about Max anymore. Just then, they reached a large metal door. Lily could hear voices from behind it, voices that made her pulse race with panic. She was about to learn the true extent of the operation, and she had to be ready for whatever came next. The warehouse was a labyrinth of dark, empty spaces, and Lily's breath echoed in the silence as she followed the hooded man down a narrow corridor. Her heart was pounding so loudly in her chest that it drowned out everything else, the only sound in her mind being the thought, Asterisk, what am I about to walk into? Asterisk. They reached a heavy, rusted metal door at the end of the hallway, the voices on the other side growing louder. The man didn't hesitate, pushing the door open just a crack. Lily could barely see what was on the other side, but she could hear the faint clinking of chains and the low growls of dogs, more than just Max. The sounds were unnerving, like an eerie chorus of animals trapped in a place they shouldn't be. The hooded man motioned for her to stay back, then peered through the crack. His eyes narrowed, and Lily saw his jaw tighten. "They're here," he whispered. "We have to move quickly." Suddenly, a flashlight flickered on from the other side of the door. The low murmur of voices stilled, and for a heartbeat, there was complete silence. Lily's stomach twisted into knots. Someone had heard the movement, and in that split second, she realized how dangerous this entire situation had become. The hooded man grabbed her arm and pulled her back into the shadows of the hallway. He lowered his voice to an urgent hiss. "I told you, this is bigger than just Max. They're running an illegal dogfighting ring, using trained K9s for underground operations. Max isn't the only one they've taken. There's more. Much more." Lily's mind was reeling, trying to process the magnitude of what he was saying. Dogfighting, her throat tightened, and her eyes stung with the horror of it all. But there was no time to dwell on the shock. She had come here to save Max, and she wasn't leaving without him. Before she could respond, the door creaked open slightly wider, and a figure stepped into view. Lily's heart skipped. The man who had been talking, he wasn't just a criminal. He was the buyer, the one who had been after Max. His cold eyes locked onto the hooded man, and for a split second, everything seemed to freeze. "Get away from her," the man said, his voice low and menacing. Without warning, the hooded man shoved Lily behind him, creating a barrier between her and the dangerous figure. A fight erupted as the two men grappled, the sound of bodies slamming into walls reverberating through the dark space. Lily felt her pulse thundering in her ears, but she didn't have time to think. She had to act. Now. She darted past the struggling men and rushed to the door. Through the crack, she could see them. Max was there, along with several other K9s, all locked in cages. Some of them growled softly. Others lay quietly, looking defeated. Max was at the front, his eyes lighting up as he saw Lily. The moment their gazes met, Lily knew it was time. There was no turning back. She quickly reached for the lock on the nearest cage. Her fingers were shaking, but she forced herself to stay calm. The door clicked open. Max leaped out, his tail wagging weakly, but his presence was a wave of relief. He was alive. He was here. Lily didn't waste a second. She grabbed Max's harness and ran toward the back exit, where she and the hooded man had entered. Behind her, she could hear the scuffle of footsteps and shouted orders. The sound of pursuit sent a surge of adrenaline through her, and she didn't dare look back. Max kept pace with her, staying close, as though he knew what was at stake. The warehouse loomed behind them, and Lily could hear the crash of doors slamming open as the men realized she had escaped with the dogs. But they wouldn't catch her. Not tonight. As Lily and Max burst into the open air, the distant sound of sirens reached her ears, followed by the faint wail of a police car's siren. The hooded man had made sure the police were on their way. They would handle the rest. Lily stopped for a moment, her breath coming in short gasps, and turned to Max. The dog nuzzled her hand, his eyes full of love and relief. They had done it. They had both made it out alive. And as Lily and Max disappeared into the night, she knew one thing for certain. No one could ever separate them again.